It was a bright, sunny afternoon, the kind where the city seemed calm and ordinary. Chuck Norris, dressed in a simple black jacket, jeans, and sunglasses, was casually walking down a busy street. He was alone, sipping a coffee, enjoying the day, unaware that this quiet moment was about to turn tense. People around him were going about their routines, shopping, chatting, taking photos, but few noticed the legendary martial artist walking among them. A patrol car slowly rolled down the street. One officer, tall, stern-faced, and clearly on edge, caught sight of Chuck. His eyes narrowed. From a distance, Chuck seemed like any other man, but something about his demeanor triggered the officer's bias. He didn't recognize him. He only saw someone suspicious. The officer stepped out and approached Chuck with an aggressive posture. "Hey, you there. Stop," he barked. Chuck glanced at him calmly, raising a hand slightly in a peaceful gesture. "Is there a problem, officer?" The officer's face twisted with irritation. "What are you doing here? Show me your ID." His voice carried over the street, drawing the attention of passers-by. Chuck, ever composed, reached for his wallet and handed over his identification. The officer looked at it briefly, frowning. "You're acting suspicious. Are you sure you're not hiding something?" Chuck took a deep breath, keeping his tone steady and polite. "I'm just walking and enjoying my day, officer. I haven't done anything wrong." Despite Chuck's calm demeanor, the officer's aggression intensified. He leaned closer, his words sharp and threatening, as if mere politeness could be mistaken for defiance. Bystanders began slowing down, curious, some pulling out their phones to record. Chuck didn't flinch. His calm, steady gaze contrasted sharply with the officer's growing hostility. Even Chuck's measured silence seemed to make the officer angrier. He waved his hand dismissively, trying to assert authority. Chuck, standing firm but respectful, didn't respond with anger or confrontation. Instead, he let his presence speak for itself, a quiet but undeniable force. People began whispering, sensing something unusual. Why is he being treated like this? Who is that man? Chuck's eyes scanned the street, aware of the attention, yet focused solely on staying composed. What Chuck did next shocked everyone nearby. The officer's tone grew harsher as he continued to confront Chuck. "I said stop right there. Who are you really?" His hand hovered near his belt, the tension in his posture unmistakable. Chuck, however, remained calm. He folded his arms briefly, meeting the officer's gaze without fear. "Officer, I haven't done anything wrong," he said evenly. "I'm just enjoying a walk. Please, there's no need to escalate this." The cop snorted dismissively. "Don't talk back. You need to show respect for authority. Step aside." Chuck took a slow step to the side, careful not to make sudden movements. Around them, pedestrians had begun to notice the unfolding drama. Some slowed their pace, others stopped entirely. A young couple quietly raised their phones to record the incident. One elderly man muttered, "This doesn't seem right." The officer seemed to sense the attention but ignored it, his ego driving him forward. "Do you even live in this area? What's your business here?" he demanded. Chuck's expression remained calm, but his eyes betrayed a sharp awareness. "I live nearby. I was just walking and getting some fresh air. That's all." The cop wasn't satisfied. He leaned in, his face red with frustration. "I don't believe you. You're hiding something." Bystanders began murmuring among themselves. Some whispered to friends, while others discreetly continued recording. The crowd's presence seemed to make the officer even more determined to assert control. Yet, Chuck's composure never wavered. His voice, steady and firm, carried a quiet authority that made even strangers feel respect for him. A teenager in the crowd called out nervously, "Hey, what's going on? Why is he being treated like this?" The officer barked, "Mind your own business," but the whispers had already spread. Chuck glanced around, noticing the growing attention. He didn't use it to intimidate the officer. He simply stood tall, confident in the knowledge that he could handle whatever came next without aggression. Every movement was calculated, calm, and deliberate. The officer's frustration boiled over. He gestured for Chuck to follow him to a nearby curb, raising his voice. "I said move." Now, Chuck complied slowly, carefully, making sure not to provoke unnecessary conflict. At this moment, more people in the crowd began discreetly taking videos and photos. The officer remained unaware that the entire encounter was being documented from multiple angles. Every step he took was being recorded by smartphones in the hands of concerned onlookers. If you're watching this, comment below which city or country you're from. Did you expect to see something like this happen in your neighborhood? The officer, now visibly agitated, tried to assert authority verbally, but Chuck remained unshaken. Please, there's no reason for hostility, he said quietly but firmly. We can resolve this peacefully. A nearby mother held her child closer, and a man on a bench shook his head in disbelief. The tension was palpable. Chuck's calm demeanor created a stark contrast to the officer's aggression, making the situation feel even more surreal for everyone watching. At one point, the officer leaned closer to Chuck, nearly shouting now. Do you think you can talk to me like that? I'm in charge here. Chuck's response was simple but commanding. I respect your position, officer. But respect should be mutual. Threats and intimidation aren't necessary. This simple statement seemed to momentarily confuse the officer. He wasn't used to being spoken to in such a composed, authoritative manner by someone he considered beneath him. The crowd continued to grow, phones aimed discreetly at the scene, recording every word, gesture, and step. Little did the officer know, this confrontation was being documented in real time. Footage that could and would have consequences far beyond this street. As tension mounted, Chuck subtly positioned himself to protect both himself and the bystanders, demonstrating that he could handle the situation without escalating it physically. His calmness was magnetic, drawing attention and respect from those around him. Even the officer seemed slightly off balance, caught between frustration, confusion, and the growing realization that the crowd was now watching his every move. Yet, he didn't stop. He continued to press, unknowingly stepping closer to a consequence he could not yet see. The situation was about to get even more intense, and Chuck's next move would leave the crowd speechless. The officer's face was flushed, veins standing out on his forehead, as he pointed a finger toward Chuck. I've told you to cooperate. Step aside or I'll have no choice but to take action, he barked, his voice echoing down the street. Pedestrians froze in place, sensing that the situation was escalating beyond an ordinary confrontation. Chuck Norris remained calm, his posture straight, his eyes locked on the officers. Officer, he said evenly, I've done nothing wrong. There is no need for threats. We can resolve this peacefully. The officer's scowl deepened. Don't give me attitude. I am the law here. He took a threatening step closer, his hand twitching toward his belt. Chuck shifted subtly, maintaining a safe distance while keeping a composed, non-aggressive stance. Chuck's presence radiated a quiet authority. Passers-by noticed the contrast immediately, the cop's anger versus Chuck's calm control. People started whispering. Who is this man? Why is he staying so calm? Some raised their phones higher to record. Others edged closer, hoping to see what would happen next. A young woman clutched her child tightly. Mom, what's going on? She asked. Her mother shook her head, uneasy. Chuck noticed the tension around him and subtly moved to shield bystanders without making it obvious. He wasn't there to escalate. He was there to protect and de-escalate simultaneously. The officer, frustrated that his intimidation tactics were failing, began to raise his voice even more. I will not be disrespected. Step aside or face consequences. Chuck's reply was steady, firm, and precise. Threatening someone who hasn't done anything wrong isn't respect. If you want respect, you must give it first. His calm, unwavering voice cut through the noise. The crowd fell slightly silent, absorbing the words. Even some pedestrians holding cameras lowered their phones for a brief moment, captivated by his control. The officer waved his hands, clearly flustered. Do you think you can talk back to me like this? He demanded, his face red with rage. Chuck didn't flinch. Instead, he let the officer's aggression hang in the air, unchallenged physically, yet completely contained by his mental focus. The crowd's attention intensified. People began recording from multiple angles, some whispering to each other. Is he a celebrity? One man asked. Chuck noticed the curiosity in their eyes, but did not use it for leverage. He remained humble, relying solely on his calm authority. The officer, now desperate, attempted to intimidate Chuck with proximity, leaning in closer, his voice almost shouting. Move where I tell you. Now, Chuck remained grounded, taking a small, deliberate step to the side, not to flee, but to ensure he wasn't cornered. I'm already here peacefully, he said. I will not escalate, but I will not be humiliated either. The officer's hand twitched toward his baton as he gestured angrily. Chuck's eyes flicked briefly to the surrounding crowd. Every person, every phone recording the scene, every bystander watching, added a subtle layer of accountability that the officer hadn't yet realized. If you were standing here, watching this happen, what would you do? Type your answer in the comments below. A tense silence hung in the air. The officer's frustration reached a peak. He was furious, yet he was being held in check by something he couldn't see. Chuck's unshakable composure. Chuck's body language communicated strength without aggression, an invisible barrier no one dared cross. Bystanders began whispering to each other, pointing their cameras discreetly. Chuck's calm control was magnetic. People were drawn to him, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. The officer, now isolated, failed to notice that his actions were being captured from multiple perspectives. Chuck's children and family were not present this time, but he treated the crowd like his own, protecting them with every subtle movement. The cop's threats seemed meaningless compared to the respect Chuck commanded simply by standing tall and composed. The standoff continued, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The officer's aggression was public, visible, and increasingly ridiculous in contrast to Chuck's measured restraint. Every passerby recording meant potential exposure, a risk the officer still did not comprehend. As Part 3 closed, the situation had reached a boiling point. Chuck had resisted intimidation. The officer had escalated. And the crowd, fully aware now that something significant was unfolding, leaned in, ready for what would happen next. Little did the cop know. The man he was threatening was about to reveal a presence even more powerful than the fury he faced, and the world would soon know. The crowd had grown noticeably larger. Pedestrians who were once simply curious had now gathered, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. Phones were raised everywhere, capturing every word, every gesture. The officer, oblivious to the attention, continued his aggressive stance, demanding compliance from Chuck. But Chuck remained calm, composed, and unshaken. His breathing was steady, his posture confident. He had faced far worse than a single officer's misplaced rage, and it showed. Yet, he did not gloat or intimidate. He simply stood, letting the officer's hostility make him look increasingly foolish in front of the crowd. A young man in the audience, filming from a distance, whispered to his friend, "Wait, is that Chuck Norris?" The words spread like wildfire. A woman standing nearby gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "Oh my God, that's him. That's the martial arts legend." Whispers traveled quickly, the excitement growing louder as more people realized who they were witnessing. "That's Chuck Norris. The fighter, the actor, the man who's been in countless movies. He's a legend." Yet, the officer remained entirely unaware. He continued to bark orders, his anger rising with each second. His arrogance blinded him to the fact that he was no longer just confronting a man. He was confronting a living legend. Chuck's calm gaze swept across the crowd, noting the growing tension and anticipation. People whispered to one another, asking questions, murmuring about how the officer seemed oblivious to the identity of the man before him. Chuck didn't use this recognition to threaten or intimidate the officer. Instead, he remained humble, letting the natural power of his presence and reputation speak for itself. The officer, frustrated that his intimidation tactics were failing, shouted, "I don't care who you are. Step aside now." Chuck replied quietly but firmly, "I am not stepping aside because I have done nothing wrong. Respect should not be demanded. It must be mutual." A few brave bystanders started to speak up. "Sir, this isn't right. You're treating him unfairly." A teenager added, "Why are you harassing someone for no reason?" The crowd's murmurs grew louder, forming a chorus of quiet judgment. The officer glanced around, noticing the attention for the first time, but he misread it. He assumed the crowd was simply being noisy, not realizing that cameras and phones were already recording everything. Every moment, every word, every unreasonable action on his part was being documented. Chuck, sensing the rising support from the bystanders, remained perfectly still, calm, and in control. His presence alone seemed to command respect, and the whispers about his identity added another layer of tension to the scene. A man muttered, "Do you realize who this is? That's Chuck Norris, the world champion, the martial artist, the hero of countless people. Even with this revelation spreading, Chuck did not raise his voice, did not strike fear into anyone. He simply maintained his composure, demonstrating that true strength lies in control and humility rather than aggression. The officer, increasingly agitated, failed to notice that his every word and gesture was being filmed from multiple angles. Phones in the crowd silently recorded the confrontation, capturing the injustice, the officer's hostility, and Chuck's unwavering calm. Have you ever realized someone's true power only after seeing them under pressure? Comment below if you've ever witnessed something like this. As Part 4 drew to a close, the whispers of recognition rippled through the crowd. Chuck's presence had shifted the energy of the scene. The officer was losing control, unaware that the world around him was quietly observing and documenting every moment. The tension had reached a tipping point. What happened next would change everything, and the crowd, now fully engaged, was ready to witness the turning of the tables. Now, Chuck would finally speak, and when he did, every word would silence the crowd and shake the officer to his core. The street had become a stage. Phones were raised everywhere, capturing the scene as the officer's frustration escalated. Chuck Norris stood calmly, his eyes scanning the crowd and the officer with a quiet authority that made the tension nearly tangible. Every passerby could feel it, the contrast between unchecked aggression and composed strength. The officer, now red-faced and trembling with anger, gestured wildly. I said, "Step aside. Don't talk back to me like that." His voice cracked slightly, betraying his growing unease. He had expected compliance, not defiance paired with calm. Chuck took a deep, measured breath, his posture unwavering. Then, in a clear, firm, and commanding voice that carried across the street, he spoke. "Officer, respect is not given because someone wears a badge. Respect is earned through your actions. You do not gain authority by intimidating or humiliating others. You gain it by upholding justice." The words cut through the noise, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. Pedestrians paused mid-step, mouths slightly open, phones lowering briefly as they absorbed the weight of the statement. Chuck's calmness radiated power without aggression. The officer's jaw tightened. "Who do you think you are?" he barked, but there was a slight falter in his tone now, a hint that the crowd's attention and Chuck's composure were beginning to overpower him. Chuck continued, his voice steady. "You are here to protect, not to abuse. Profiling someone based on appearance is not strength. It is fear disguised as power. It is weakness, not authority." The crowd collectively leaned in. Some whispered in disbelief. "He's right. This man is unbelievable." The officer's face grew redder, his hands shaking slightly. He realized that this confrontation was no longer just a personal interaction. It had become public judgment. Chuck's calm, unwavering gaze met the officer's. "I have done nothing wrong, yet you treat me as a threat. Every person here can see it. The world is watching. And one day, every unjust action is recorded. That is the law that cannot be ignored." The murmurs turned into soft applause. People clapped quietly, not wanting to escalate the situation further, but unable to contain their admiration. The officer's anger now battled with embarrassment, frustration, and the creeping realization that he had lost control. Chuck did not stop. Every word was deliberate, carefully measured, powerful in its moral clarity. When you abuse power, you do not prove strength. You expose weakness. You do not earn respect, you lose it. True courage is restraint, not violence. True power is justice, not fear. The crowd was silent. Some had stopped recording, captivated entirely by Chuck's presence and his words. Others whispered among themselves. "He's teaching a lesson, to the officer, to everyone." The officer's hands clenched into fists. His voice wavered as he tried to regain authority. You will regret speaking to me like this." Chuck tilted his head slightly, still calm, still composed, still commanding. "I do not regret standing for what is right. And you will not gain respect through fear, only through accountability." The bystanders could sense the officer losing control. His posturing, once confident, now appeared desperate. He realized too late that every word, every gesture, every act of aggression was being documented. The realization that this confrontation could be witnessed far beyond this street filled him with unease. Have you ever seen someone stand up to injustice with nothing but words and calm authority? Comment below with your experience. As the standoff reached its peak, Chuck's words resonated across the crowd. They were not just words to the officer. They were a lesson in morality, courage, and restraint. Every passerby, every phone camera, every whisper in the crowd amplified the impact. Even the youngest spectators could sense the gravity of the moment. That true power is measured not by aggression, but by dignity and justice. And Chuck, calm and resolute, embodied that power completely. By the end of Part 5, the officer had visibly begun to lose control. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his voice shook, and his previous sense of dominance had crumbled. Chuck's moral authority and composure had overtaken the situation completely, and the crowd, now fully engaged and witnessing the spectacle, waited with bated breath for the next development. Now, the true twist would come, one that the officer could never have anticipated, and a moment that would humiliate him completely in front of the world. The officer's frustration was now palpable. His attempts to intimidate Chuck had failed completely. The crowd around them had grown even larger, and whispers of recognition were spreading like wildfire. People were recording everything, capturing not only the officer's hostility, but also Chuck's calm and commanding presence. Chuck's eyes scanned the crowd, taking in the subtle hints of support and recognition. He remained composed, as if fully aware of what was about to happen next. The officer, meanwhile, was still oblivious to the full scope of the situation. He barked orders, his confidence waning, clearly frustrated that his authority no longer commanded respect. Then it happened. From the crowd, a man in plain clothes, seemingly just another bystander, stepped forward and approached the officer quietly. "Sir," he said softly, holding out a device connected to a secure FBI monitoring feed. "You should know, he's being recorded right now." "For the FBI." The officer froze. His face drained of color. What do you mean?" he stammered. Chuck's calm voice cut through the tension. "Every unjust act leaves a trace. Every abuse of power is observed." The officer's hands trembled as he realized the enormity of the situation. All of his aggressive behavior, all his attempts to humiliate Chuck, had been secretly recorded by the crowd and simultaneously captured for federal authorities. He had no idea how long this surveillance had been active, or the reach it now had. The crowd erupted into murmurs, then whispers, then audible gasps. "Did you hear that?" one woman asked. "The FBI?" Another person added. No wonder he was so calm, he knew. Chuck took a deliberate step forward, maintaining his composure, as if the revelation had done nothing to faze him personally. Yet the power shift was undeniable. The officer, once towering and aggressive, now looked small and embarrassed in front of everyone. His voice cracked as he attempted to regain authority. I didn't know." Chuck's response was simple, yet devastating in its moral weight. "You always have a choice. You can choose respect, fairness, and integrity, or you can choose fear, aggression, and humiliation. Today you chose poorly." Phones continued to record, capturing every reaction from the bystanders: astonishment, relief, admiration, and even laughter at the officer's predicament. Chuck's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the cop's flustered, desperate energy. It was a lesson in humility played out in real time, visible to anyone watching. The officer looked around, realizing that the entire street had witnessed his embarrassment. People were pointing, shaking their heads, and whispering about the irony of the situation. The very person he had tried to intimidate, someone calm, respectful, and obviously powerful, had exposed not only his bias, but also his vulnerability. Chuck didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice or smirk. Instead, he addressed the crowd with a quiet authority that commanded attention. "Let this be a lesson. Abuse of power is always visible. Disrespecting someone because of their appearance is never acceptable. Integrity and humility are stronger than fear and aggression." The crowd, now fully captivated, applauded. Some cheered quietly, others mouthed words of admiration. The officer, humiliated and visibly shaken, could do nothing but step back, realizing the public and legal consequences he now faced. That if you were watching this, how would you react if someone abused their power and got exposed like this? Comment below. Chuck's presence remained composed, almost serene. The weight of the moment rested not on anger, but on the undeniable lesson he had delivered: justice, respect, and accountability. The crowd's energy had shifted completely, Where there was tension, now there was awe. Where there was fear, now there was admiration. The revelation of FBI oversight transformed the scene. The officer had not only lost control of the confrontation, but he had also lost credibility in front of everyone present. The whispers of Chuck Norris, the legend, became louder, merging with the realization that power and authority are meaningless without morality. As the officer retreated, muttering excuses and fumbling with his words, Chuck's calm gaze swept across the crowd. He had allowed the situation to resolve itself without violence, without intimidation, yet the lesson was clear to all. Respect and justice always prevail. The video would soon go viral. The officer would face consequences, and Chuck's message about humility and accountability would spread worldwide. But how would the world react? By the time the confrontation ended, the street had quieted, but the energy lingered like electricity in the air. Pedestrians, still in shock, lowered their phones, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Others looked around at the officer, now slinking away, humbled and humiliated, as the crowd's whispers shifted from confusion to awe. Within minutes, the videos captured by multiple bystanders had begun circulating online. Clips of the aggressive officer, his red-faced frustration, and Chuck Norris standing calm, unshaken, and commanding quickly spread across social media platforms. Viewers everywhere paused in disbelief. Comments began pouring in. That cop didn't know who he was messing with. Chuck Norris is the definition of calm power. Justice served without a single punch, legendary. News outlets picked up the story within hours. Headlines shouted, "Racist cop humiliated by martial arts legend." FBI recording exposes abuse of power, and Chuck Norris stands tall against intimidation, sends powerful message about respect and accountability. The clips racked up millions of views, likes, and shares. The hashtag #RespectChuckNorris began trending worldwide. Meanwhile, the officer faced immediate scrutiny. Complaints were filed, internal investigations launched, and his actions were dissected by both social media commentators and official authorities. The humiliation he endured on that street now extended across the globe, a cautionary tale of what happens when authority is abused. Chuck, however, did not seek attention or gloat. He issued a brief statement through the media. Standing up to injustice does not require aggression. Respect is mutual, and those in positions of authority must never forget it. Today, a lesson was learned, not just by one officer, but by all who witnessed it. Let this serve as a reminder. Kindness, integrity, and calmness are stronger than fear and intimidation. Social media exploded with admiration for Chuck's restraint. Memes, short clips, and fan reactions flooded every platform. Some posts focused on his legendary martial arts career. Others praised his moral courage. Across the globe, people were inspired, debating and discussing the importance of respect, accountability, and standing up to abuse without resorting to violence. In schools, offices, and households, discussions about ethical authority and humility spread. Videos of Chuck's calm confrontation became case studies in leadership seminars, law enforcement training sessions, and motivational forums. The lesson was clear. True strength lies in composure, courage, and moral integrity. Even months later, the story remained relevant. The officer had faced consequences, social discourse had intensified, and Chuck's approach became a benchmark for handling conflict with dignity. Every new clip or article referenced the initial confrontation, reinforcing the idea that courage and justice can prevail without a single act of physical violence. If you believe no one should be judged by appearance or abused by authority, type respect in the comments below. Share your thoughts and stories about standing up for what's right. The world had witnessed more than a public confrontation. It had witnessed a lesson in courage, humility, and accountability. Chuck Norris had turned what could have been a violent escalation into a masterclass of restraint, dignity, and moral power. As the story circulated, millions were reminded of a universal truth. Authority is meaningless without integrity, and every act of injustice can, and will, be exposed. And in that moment, Chuck Norris wasn't just a martial arts legend. He was a symbol of justice, humility, and the enduring power of standing for what is right. The streets where it all began might have returned to normal, but the impact of that day stretched far beyond. The viral videos, The trending hashtags and the public discussions ensured that Chuck's lesson would resonate worldwide. And for those watching, the story became more than entertainment. It became a call to uphold respect, fairness, and accountability in every aspect of life.